Hello everybody and welcome back. Today, thanks to the release of the PlayStation VR 2, it's time to update our list of best VR games yet again. Now this won't be your standard popularity contest. There's games from all platforms including PCVR, Quest, Pico, and PlayStation VR 1 and 2. I'll cover a large array of different genres to make sure there's something for everyone, drop in some classic titles that you might not have heard of, and even give you a few games to look out for that are coming soon. Now I'd love to hear your favorite games down in the comments right now, and there are of course the links and timestamps if you want to skip ahead. But before we jump in, this video is brought to you by my sponsor Kiwi Design. They currently make my favorite Quest 2 Elite strap, which comes in multiple different versions. You can add an extra battery pack, high quality headphones, or even both. They also have other products like Valve Index style hand straps, and they just introduced a brand new RGB stand. Your controllers and headset magnetically connect. There's a charging indicator so you'll know when your headset's ready to go. And there's plenty of different RGB color options available. There's a link to Kiwi Design down in the description. And don't forget to use discount code Mateo311 for 5% off and to help support this channel. Now I will be going in no specific order and separating these titles by both platform and genre. For the largest appeal, we'll start with Multiplat Games, and the co-op shooter After the Fall is a great way to kick this video off. After the Fall features crossplay with every single VR platform out there, making it extremely easy to grab 3 of your buddies and immediately start mowing down some snowbreed zombies. This is a fast-paced, high-adrenaline arcade-style shooter with plenty of replayability and a large amount of unlockable weapons and skins. There's even a PvP mode if you want to change things up, and the developers have been hard at work to constantly pump out new updates. Now this might not be a must-play title, but it's extremely easy to recommend to just about everyone. Now while there's plenty of options for competitive shooters out there, due to its recent release on the PlayStation VR 2, we're putting Pavlov on the top of the multiplat list. Pavlov is basically VR's answer to Counter-Strike. You have the same weapon purchasing mechanics and bomb defusal gameplay modes, but the game has grown into so much more over the years, and there's now World War II settings with tanks, plenty of different game modes, and a huge array of mods that allow you to experience things like Call of Duty Zombies. While Pavlov might not be everyone's favorite shooter, and there's arguments to be made for or against other games like Contractors and Onward, but Pavlov just seems to be tried and true with the largest mainstream appeal. Now if you rather compete against the world itself, the survival genre has Into the Radius. You're dropped in a creepy dystopian world filled with shadow-like creatures, random anomalies, and no memory to speak of. The horrific storyline is drip-fed to you with some creepy moments, and this game's mechanics are hardcore and unforgiving. You'll truly have to work to survive and figure out what the heck is going on. But Into the Radius almost qualifies as a horror title, so let's lighten things up with the platformer Moss. Moss Book 1 and 2 is absolutely fantastic. As a non-platformer fan, I was absolutely blown away. The environments are stunningly beautiful, combat is fun and strategic, the puzzles offer a good challenge, and you truly feel like you end up forming a bond with the game's mouse protagonist, Quill. Honestly guys, I was a huge skeptic on this title, but it kept getting recommended to me, and I'm glad that it was. Another title I was skeptical of was the social application Rec Room. Don't let the childlike appearance fool you, there's fun to be had here for just about anyone. The classic game modes like laser tag, paintball, and quests are just straight up fun. They've also added plenty of additional content over the years, including things like Battle Royale and Rally Racing, plus there's a huge amount of user-generated content. Now it's free, so before you knock it, at least go out and give it a try. And another genre I highly recommend you try is tabletop gaming with Demeo. Now this isn't exactly an RPG, but rather a strategy-based dungeon crawler where you and up to 3 of your buddies get to pick between 7 different characters, all with unique abilities. It's a mad dash through 2 dungeon levels, followed by an epic boss fight. There's currently 5 separate adventures to go on. They generally take around 2 hours to complete, and it's always a challenge, especially if your team isn't up to snuff. Demeo also features a player hangout, a minis painting station, and a PvP mode is coming in a future update. Now, tabletop games were the inspiration for our next genre, and that's MMOs. Now, this category is severely lacking, so we're just gonna drop in Zenith. Now, usually this is a love it or hate it title. I personally had a lot of issues with it around launch time, but I can say the game has improved, becoming both more social and new user friendly. There's also some people that just love the grind, so Zenith will definitely satisfy there. Now, the recent introduction of pets and full body tracking does make the world feel a bit more alive, and I do understand the appeal of this title, it's just not for me. But a VR genre that I do truly enjoy is the roguelite, and I've been a fan of Until You Fall for years now. The combination of beautiful graphics, highly strategic melee combat, and truly exciting weapon upgrades and unlockables easily makes this one of my favorite VR games. It's extremely difficult and just absolutely perfect for short gameplay sessions. Now this is mainly due to the fact that you can only take dying so much, and this game is like pure cardio. Anything over an hour will have you in a full sweat. Now there's also a newcomer to this genre that I want to mention, and that's the Light Brigade, which has a lot of exciting components, but I'm yet to actually complete it, so I'm not sure if it belongs on a best of list just yet. Now, if you're into action-adventure games, you're going to have to put Iron Man VR on your list. There's excellent graphics, truly compelling storytelling, fun combat, but best of all, you actually get to feel like Iron Man. Blasting off into the sky and firing repulsors from your palms and missiles from your wrists just never gets old. Which is good because the game makes you do it a lot, but outside of that semi-grindy repetitive combat are some absolutely epic moments that gave me goosebumps more than once, and there's also just the perfect amount of creepy moments. So I highly recommend you live out your childhood fantasy and jump into the Iron Man suit. But if you're one of those kids who enjoyed playing in the sandbox and like to make your own fun, then go ahead and get Blade and Sorcery. This physics-based melee fighting title is absolutely addictive. It's also responsible for about 50% of all the VR gaming clips out there. There's a large array of different weapons and spells to master, slow motion decapitation never gets old, and the mod community for this title is just absolutely insane. You can once again become Iron Man, wield Thor's hammer, become Spider-Man with a pistol, or get into some Jedi battles. So if you enjoy making your own fun, Blade and Sorcery is an absolute must-have, just like Bonelab. Also featuring a physics-based system, this title additionally has a single-player campaign, an emphasis on firearms, and multiple different game modes to explore. You can parkour across buildings like Neo in the Matrix, transform into different sized creatures and just throw your enemies around, or just have fun with physics in the experimental zones. Bonelab is a truly one-of-a-kind title that might not be for everyone, but it's an absolutely amazing experience. Speaking of not right for everyone, our next genre is the puzzle games. It's a tight toss-up here between Wanderer and Red Matter 2. Both are visually stunning with compelling storylines and truly difficult puzzles. Now in terms of production value and overall storyline, I lean more towards Wanderer, but personally I enjoy the gameplay of Red Matter 2 just a little bit more. Now our next title is technically a puzzle game, but it fits more into the escape room category. I Expect You to Die 1 and 2 are just quirky masterpieces. With its spy theme, you constantly find yourself in peril, but you'll also be killed in the most hilarious ways. It might be an exploding cigar, or a booby-trapped car, but whatever it ends up being is usually unexpected, and definitely makes you chuckle a bit. Now I wanted to include a true arcadey-style single-player shooter on this list, and I still absolutely love Robo Recall. This was a classic Oculus title that was truly ahead of its time. There's a cute little storyline, excellent graphics, but above all else, fun and addictive mechanics. You're teleporting across the screen, ripping enemies apart, smashing them together, juggling them in the air with your bullets, forcing enemies to use their weapons against one another, and even catching ammunition midair and throwing it back. For the life of me, I can't understand why we never got a sequel, or another studio hasn't copied this formula. Now I usually prefer games that have a more serious tone, but this one is just undeniably fun. And speaking of fun, we have the rhythm title Beat Saber. In this genre, it is the undisputed king. It's extremely easy to get into, but takes years to master. There's a challenge level for everyone, as my daughter's already capable of completing levels at the age of 8, and then you'll see people entering full-fledged Beat Saber competitions. There's been a steady stream of new licensed music and updates over the years, and this is just one of those must-play titles for VR. Similar to everyone's favorite VR Battle Royale, Population 1. Now, it's not quite as popular as Fortnite, but it's definitely VR's response. The competition out there is fierce, there's plenty of unlockable players and skins, the studio's constantly banging out new updates and special events, and their latest sandbox mode makes this game so much easier to recommend, because even if you're not into shooters or the Battle Royale genre, you could easily just build your own social hub, or try and recreate the game of your dreams. But that right there was our multi-platform list, and from here we're moving into platform exclusives. Starting with the PlayStation 1 and the horror genre, we have Resident Evil 7. This game detracted from the previous Resident Evil titles, and rather than giving us plenty of action, it focused more on storytelling and a high-tension atmosphere. The concept of being locked in a house with a psychotic family feels like something straight out of a horror movie, and VR definitely takes it up a notch. But I personally prefer the sci-fi storytelling of Farpoint. Time travel, aliens, a mysterious planet, an emotional storyline, and great shooter mechanics all add up to one of my favorite PlayStation VR 1 games. This was a surprise hit for me that I actually played through in one sitting. I took a few snack and bathroom breaks, but besides that, it was all game. Now a little cherry on top for this title is the fact that you could play it in a co-op mode, and I really hope they give us a free PlayStation VR 2 upgrade. And speaking of the PlayStation VR 2, we need an upgrade for Astrobot. Easily up there with Moss, this is one of VR's best platformers. Astro is adorable, and it's a delight to rescue all of his friends. Not only is this a solid platformer, But Sony also knows how to use this to truly show off VR. You'll be plunging underwater, physically dodging enemy projectiles, and having creatures get up close and personal right in your face. Well, let's move on to Quest 2 exclusives, which is the shortest part of today's list. The obvious first must-play title is the action-adventure game Resident Evil 4. This is an absolute classic that has been ported into VR phenomenally well. You'll physically stab parasite-infected enemies, pull out an array of different guns and fill them with holes, and make your way through an absolutely creepy and pretty bizarre storyline. These older Resident Evil titles are filled with truly bizarre enemies, and it's absolutely fantastic to experience them from a VR perspective. Now, the Quest 2's other must-play exclusive is In Death Unchained. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, wait, In Death is on PC. But that's a much older version of the game that was done by a different studio and has not received updates in an extended period of time. In Death Unchained has multiple different afterlife-themed worlds, extremely difficult roguelike gameplay, plenty of creepy moments, and a ton of replayability. The overall atmosphere of this game is fantastic, and there's nothing else quite like it. But let's move into some PCVR exclusives. The obvious first choice is the story-driven single-player shooter, Half-Life Alyx. Stunning graphics, excellent physics, a compelling storyline, and an absolutely loved IP. In 2019, Valve showed us what VR is truly capable of, and we've been waiting to recapture that glory ever since. This is undeniably a must-play VR title, and after you complete it once or twice, there's a huge array of excellent mods to check out. I highly recommend the BioShock Return to Rapture mod, which uses official assets and has an absolutely amazing level design. Asgard's Wrath is my favorite VR RPG, featuring a 40-hour single-player campaign, excellent melee mechanics, and some of the best storytelling that VR has to offer. You'll pop in and out between Mortal and God mode in order to solve puzzles and combat different enemies, and you'll get an array of powerful pets that you can use in combat. If you've never tried it, I highly recommend it, just like the next game Lone Echo 1 and 2. When storytelling, atmosphere, and graphics are at the forefront of what you want, there's not much better than Lone Echo. Now, both titles might be a little bit of a slow burn, but they both feature some of the best sci-fi storytelling that can easily compete with other titles like Mass Effect and Horizon Zero Dawn. So you don't want to sleep on this game or our next sandbox shooter, Boneworks. I know Bonelab is currently available, and you're most likely tempted to pick it up instead of Boneworks, but there's something about the original that I just enjoy more than Bonelab. This physics-based shooter will take you on a pretty bizarre ride, and then there's plenty of fun to be had in the sandbox and arena modes. The mod community's also had a lot of time with this game, so there's some pretty cool additional stuff that you can download. But probably one of my favorite VR shooters is Vertigo Remastered. Now, the developer is currently referring to this series as a Half-like game, but I've always described it as Half-Life meets Rick and Morty. You're trapped in an underground facility filled with plenty of bizarre creatures, and the game is just filled with excellent scripted scenes, unexpected moments, and fantastic combat. So if you haven't played it, you're truly missing out. And finally, I'm going to throw the collection of minigames, The Lab, onto this list. This was basically a Steam VR launch title, and it's still a great way to show off VR. You get to meet Gladys up close and personal, there's a cool little archery tower defense, a 3D space shooter, a trip into space, and a few more worlds to explore. It's a free experience which scores it a few extra points, so if you've never tried it, go download it right now. But let's move on to the platform that spawned this entire list, and that's the PlayStation VR 2. We now have to add 3 new games to the best of list, and the first one is Resident Evil 8. The Resident Evil titles are becoming quite popular in VR, and that's with good reason. Now, unlike Resident Evil 7, there's a much bigger world to explore, and you'll be engaged in a lot more combat, primarily battling werewolf-like creatures. You'll also be exploring a Victoria-era style castle, which is populated by some truly unforgettable characters. Now, if horror is not your style, you have to check out Horizon Call of the Mountain. Easily one of VR's best looking games, it's an absolute spectacle to behold. Fans of the Horizon games will love battling enemies from this perspective, and it's an epic journey full of exciting moments that truly showcases the power of VR. Now, I could have done with a little bit less climbing, or maybe some mechanics that made the climbing more fun, but overall it's a phenomenal title, and an absolute must-play for Horizon fans. Now, if you prefer to stay grounded and get behind a steering wheel, VR's best racing title is here. The Gran Turismo series has been around since 1997, and there's now over 400 ultra-realistic cars to check out, and over 90 tracks to drive on. So if you're looking for a realistic driving experience, this sim racer is an absolute must, and even as a self-admitted non-racing fan, it was still easy for me to get into this game. And that right there was the list of VR's best games. I'm sure you guys have some additions, so drop them in the comments right now. And before you guys go, I just have a few games to look out for that'll most likely make it on a future list. The first one is Vertigo 2. This Half-Life shooter is much larger than the original, features a new large combat area that allows you to choose a side on the battlefield, and we'll definitely be getting a lot more of that Half-Life meets Rick and Morty action. Now, if you need a new co-op shooter, VR has you covered, as we're getting Ghostbusters VR, Rise of the Ghost Lord, which is a 4-person story-driven title. While not much is known just yet, I do have high hopes, but if you just want some action-oriented co-op, we have Crossfire Sierra Squad, which looks like pure military-themed adrenaline. I'm definitely ready to join a friend in the Michael Bay of video games, and when I want something a bit more strategic, the military shooter Firewall Ultra has me covered, featuring stunning graphics, strategic gameplay, and both PvP and PvE modes. This is a shooter I'm definitely looking forward to, but I'm a sucker for a good sci-fi storyline, and the newly announced story-driven action-adventure title Journey to Foundation is exactly what I'm looking for. Now, based on the book series of Isaac Asimov and set in this rich futuristic empire, I'm truly intrigued to see what this game has to offer. Just like how I want to see what happens when I blink and switch back VR. This horror-themed roller coaster ride from hell has a unique feature where enemies will approach whenever you blink, and I think that'll truly rack up the tension.
And that was today's video, brought to you by my dad, Mateo311. If you enjoyed it, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up. And if you're new here,
Consider subscribing.
consider subscribing.
Consider subscribing.
Consider subscribing.
Consider subscribing. We'll see you guys on next time.
We'll see you guys on next time.